Okay, let's dive into the absolutely wild story of the Maharaja of Pratibandapuram. Now, this guy had a ton of grand titles, but history really just knows him by one, the Tiger King. And trust me, it's a tale that's as funny as it is legendary.
But before we even get started, let's get one very important detail out of the way. Our hero. He's gone. Yep, despite all his power and his epic title, the Tiger King is dead. And while his life was fascinating, the way he died, well, that's where the real story is. And this incredible story kicks off with probably one of the weirdest events you'll ever hear about. It all started when the king was just 10 days old, with a prophecy that he was destined to die. But this, as you're about to see, was no ordinary baby. So yeah, it all began with what you could only call a miracle in the royal court, an event that pretty much set the stage for the prince's entire bizarre life. So, picture this. The royal astrologers are all gathered around, and they predict that, like every other human, the prince would one day die. But then, and you have to hear this, the tiny 10-day-old infant actually speaks up. He demands to know how he's going to die. The astrologers are stunned, but they explain that because he was born in the hour of the bull and the tiger is the bull's enemy, his death will come from a tiger. And what does the baby do? He lets out this little growl and basically declares war on all tigers. So years go by, the king kills his very first tiger, and he's super proud. He brings the astrologer in to gloat, and the old man basically says, yeah, that's great and all, but you can kill 99 tigers. What you really have to be careful of is the 100th one. And that warning? It became his life's obsession.
And so began the great tiger hunt. This one prophecy turned into this epic, all-consuming quest. Once the prince was old enough, he made it his one and only mission to prove fate wrong. He didn't waste a single second. The day he turned 20 and took the throne, the hunt was on. He even banned anyone else in his kingdom from so much as throwing a rock at a tiger. If they did, he'd take all their stuff. Seriously, the kingdom could wait, his date with destiny could not. And you know what? He was insanely good at it. In just 10 years, he had already taken down 70 tigers. It really seemed like he was going to pull it off. The forests were just constantly echoing with his gunshots. But then he hit a snag, a really big one. He'd been so efficient that he'd actually hunted every last tiger in his own kingdom into extinction. His mission just ground to a halt. I mean, how are you supposed to kill the 100th tiger when there aren't any left? But the king got creative. When a high-ranking British officer wanted to come hunt, the king said no, which could have cost him his throne. He smoothed things over by sending the officer's wife a little gift of 50 diamond rings. But his next move was even crazier. He told his advisor to find him a princess to marry, but she had to be from a kingdom with a ton of tigers. It was a marriage based purely on hunting opportunities. And it totally worked. Every single time he went to visit his father-in-law, he'd bag another 5 or 6 tigers. His count just kept climbing until finally he hit 99. The tension was just off the charts. He was just one single tiger away from beating his destiny. All right, so this brings us to the main event, the hunt for that final fateful tiger, the one that was supposed to seal his fate. You can just imagine the anxiety in the kingdom. The problem was that 100th tiger was impossible to find. The king was getting angrier and angrier, threatening to fire everyone. So his poor minister, totally terrified for his job, did something desperate. He secretly got an old, tame tiger from a zoo in Madras, drove it to the forest, and just let it go where the king was hunting. So the next day, this old tiger just kind of wanders into the king's sight. It was a perfect, easy target. The king was thrilled. This was it, the moment of truth. He lifts his rifle, he takes careful aim, and the shot echoes through the trees. The king had fired on his destiny. And just like that, the beast collapses. The king is ecstatic. "I've killed it! I killed the 100th tiger," he yells. "My vow is fulfilled." He orders them to bring the tiger back for a huge celebration and speeds off in his car, totally convinced he'd cheated death. But hold on. That is not where this story ends, not even close. Because what actually happened in that forest is where we get the story's brilliant, ironic twist. So after the king leaves,
The hunters walk up to the tiger to carry it away, and it looks back at them, totally confused. It turns out the bullet had missed completely. The old tiger had just fainted from the shock of the loud noise. The Tiger King, in his big moment of victory, had actually failed.
Now the hunters are freaking out. They know if the king finds out he missed, they're all fired. So one of them quietly pulls out his own gun, takes aim from about a foot away, and shoots the tiger for real. The king's great victory was a total lie, all held up by his own men being terrified of him. So, with his big quest supposedly over, the king finally has some time for his family. It's his son's 3rd birthday, and he buys him a little present, a small wooden tiger. It was a cheap toy, really poorly made by some unskilled carpenter. A totally harmless little gift, right? Well, this is where fate finally makes its move. That prophecy wasn't wrong. It was just waiting. And the 100th tiger was about to get its revenge in the most unexpected way you can imagine. While he was playing with his son, a tiny little sliver of wood from that cheap toy poked the king's hand. It wasn't a big deal at first, but the wound got infected, and the infection spread all the way up his arm. They called in 3 of the best surgeons in the country. They operated, and when they came out of the room, they announced this. So let's just break this down. On one hand, you have the threat he spent his whole life fighting, a huge, powerful, living tiger. But on the other hand, the actual cause of his death? A tiny piece of wood from a cheap wooden toy. The 100th tiger got its revenge after all, just not in the way anyone, especially the king, ever saw coming. And really, that's what this whole story is about. It's a hilarious but sharp satire that makes you wonder, right? It asks us to think about how people with all the power in the world can get so obsessed with controlling their destiny that they end up completely blind to the tiny, real dangers that are right there in front of them. It's a perfect story about the foolishness of human pride.